Good evening, my friends. I would like to dedicate this lecture tonight for the good health of Uri Aminov, son of Zoya. He should be well. Amen. Also, I would like to begin this lecture with a question from Uri. Good combination. Uriel asked me a question relating to the last lecture. He heard me saying that we are not in direct connection with God, so to speak, God forbid. Because he heard, apparently, he is correct in the way he understood, because I was discussing the fact that God has angels, and one of the angels, whose name is Sandalphon, is the one who takes care of all the prayers, and he's taking them to God. So he says that means we are not in direct connection with God. How is it possible? You want to elaborate?
My follow-up question was, when we put on the tefillin, aren't we directly connected to God?
So therefore he says, it is difficult for him to understand. Didn't we understand that tefillin that we wear, it's like the antenna to the Almighty God, which means apparently by putting tefillin we are connecting with God. So therefore we should be in direct connection with God. Are we in direct connection? Are we not? And what is the point of tefillin then?
Yeah.
All right. Number one, we should know. God forbid, that's not what was meant. That we are in total direct connection with God is definitely unavoidable. Because God is everywhere, and God is in everyone's heart, and therefore we are in total connection with Him. In fact, this is the difference between the nations and the Jewish people, according to our teachings. Let me mention a certain Talmud, a certain Gemara, where it says that Moses, the Talmud in Masechet Brachot on page 7, just remember, that it says there that Moshe asked God, he asked him 3 things, and he was given the 3 things. I will talk only about one of them. Moshe asked God that His divine presence should be with us. And God gave it to him. And since then, God is with us. Up to the time when the Jewish people stood at the mountain of Sinai, before they sinned with the golden calf, God practically was walking with them. After they sinned, so it says, Hine malachi holech lefanecha. From now on, it will be my angel who will be walking with you. So Moshe says to him, no, we want you to walk with us. So God says, I am anyway with you. But in order to show a distinction, a difference between that time before the sin and that time after the sin, it looks like now we need an intermediary. We need a messenger, someone to take care of our needs and to bring it to God. But it is still only God who takes care of each one of our needs. And that's the difference between the nations and us. That when Moshe says to him, we want you to give us, to make sure that your Shekhinah, your divine presence is with us, he also asked him a second request. And he said to him, I want you also to promise me that your divine presence will not walk with the nations. And God says, got it. You have it. And it says in the Torah that Hashem gave it to him, which means he agreed, in accordance with what it says in the Pasuk, in the verse, Veniflinu ani ve'amecha that Moshe says, I and your people are going to be distinguished from the nations. So now that's the reason why among the nations, if you are a Christian, you have to go to the priest for your confession, and he is you have to, so to speak, to tell him your problems, and he is taking care of you. We don't have to do that. We have a direct link with God. We speak to him directly. So am I contradicting myself when I said that we need an angel that carries all the prayers? When we speak to God, we speak directly to him. We don't speak to Sandalphon, to the angel. But the angel carries. It's a system that God created in this world as a mission for each one of the angels. That the angel, there is one specific angel that takes care of bringing all the prayers together. But that is only when we're talking about the prayers of Israel in general. But that there is a link when we speak to God, when we say every morning or every evening, 3 times a day, when we stand and say the prayer, the silent prayer, we say, what do we say? Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. My God, open my lips so that I can sing your praises. Definitely we have a direct link. The question, however, that is still not clear, why do we need then an angel to carry the prayers? Why do we need anybody in the middle? Since we have a direct link, as I have elucidated, then we don't need an intermediary, right? The answer is this. Intermediaries are very important. Let me explain this, and this is a little bit of Kabbalah. It's a touch of Kabbalah. When God created this world, he created also, did you ever read in books of Kabbalah, the concept of the 10 Sefirot? Never happened that you opened books that have to do with Kabbalah? There are 10 Sefirot, 10 emanations that God created for the purpose to make it easy for us to benefit from his generosity, let's say, from his prosperity. Let me explain. The Talmud tells us that we pray to God for rain, right? Do you know what would happen if God directly will give us the rain? It will be too much for us. God is perfect. Whatever he gives is in tremendous profusion, abundance. And therefore we cannot sustain the benefit that comes from him directly to us if it is given directly by him. Which means his attention is direct, definitely. His concern is directly connected to us. But his rendition, which means what he gives us, must be given through intermediaries. Why? Because if it reaches us directly from God, we will not be able to sustain his great opulence. What he gives us, coming from him, cannot be received by us. We are too small. Therefore, what he gives us must be distilled. You know what is distillation? It has to go through all kinds of conduits that one gives to the other. 10 Sefirot, the 10 emanations that God created, which I'm not going to mention the names because it would mean nothing to us. And yet this is the core of the Kabbalah, of the concept of Kabbalah. But God created those 10 emanations so that the benefit that we get from him will go through all the 10 emanations. Each one, the first one, the Keter, the crown, I dared mention the first one by name, will receive it. It's still too big for us. He gives it to the one that is lower than him. It is shrinking a little. It goes to the third, it goes to the fourth, and then from the fourth to the fifth, till it reaches the bottom, the last one, which is the Yesod, the foundation. Then we are capable of benefiting from the prosperity that he gives us. So there is no contradiction here. God is directly in touch with us. At the same time, he cannot give it to us directly what we want. Therefore, he creates angels or intermediaries that would serve us by giving us, in accordance with our level, what we receive from him. What I said here is only a concept, but it requires many, many lectures. But that's, by the way, one of the most important facets of Kabbalah. So you understand why we need now. The only question that's left is, what about the tefillin? Same thing also. Yes, my friend, of course the tefillin is the antenna to God, but it's only a nice way to put it. The true meaning of tefillin is when we attach ourselves, so to speak, with the tefillin. When we tie that, those pieces of leather around our arm, it's only a way how we show him that we are attached to him. Have in mind that we are always attached to him, regardless of anything. He gives us the tefillin for several reasons. One reason, I'm going to tell you this very quickly, even though it's not the subject. The first and foremost reason of the tefillin is, when we put it on the head, it is a sign of royalty. That's how we distinguish, that's how the Jews distinguish themselves from the rest of the world, by demonstrating the fact that what God said to us at the time when he gave us the Torah at the mountain of Sinai is true. What did he say to us? You are a nation of kings. Therefore, each one of us is a king. I understand that it sounds presumptuous, it sounds arrogant. We did not decide about that. Even the nations know that. But don't you think that this is the reason why they hate us? They are jealous and everything, because they know we are the chosen people. Chosen for what? Every one of us is a king. I remember I did tell you the story of Ben Gurion when he came to America for the first time. Ben Gurion, the first prime minister of Israel. So he came to seek help from Truman, and they said to him, we need help. It's very urgent. No, it was President Eisenhower, rather. So the president said to Ben Gurion, how many people do you have how many is the population of New Israel? He says 2 million. 2 million people. He said, 2 million? You complain about 2 million? I have 200 million people in America. How can you compare your problems to mine? But Ben Gurion immediately retorted on the spot. He said to him, yeah, sure. You do have 200 million of people, but we have 2 million kings. What do you do with 2 million kings? Each one is a king. That's the problem. And by the way, the president had a nice time with that, and he left. And he understood this is true. This is what it says in their Bible also. We did not say anything that is against their Bible. So how do we demonstrate that? How do we express that? By putting tefillin. When we put tefillin, it's the sign of royalty. That's what the Rishonim explain, that by putting this tefillin, we look like kings with a crown. That's number one. There is another reason why we put tefillin. When we attach our arms, we put that on the head. The tefillin consists of two parts, the head and the arm. The arm represents everything that is physical that we do, and the head represents everything that we think. And this way we show that whatever we realize and whatever we succeed doing through our head, whether it is teaching or philosophy or whatever it is that has to do with the brain, we know it comes from God. What about physical things? Let's say a carpenter. It's his biceps that work, it's his muscles. And still he has to know that it is from God. That's why we attach our arm to the tefillin, showing that whatever we do physically is given to us only through the generosity and the help of God. That's the second reason for tefillin. Of course, there are other reasons that are secret reasons according to Kabbalah, but that's how the Torah decided how we demonstrate our Judaism, by putting tefillin. Of course, women do not have to put tefillin because the mitzvah of tefillin is a mitzvah that is in the category of mitzvot aseh she'azman grama. Since the mitzvah of tefillin cannot be performed in the night, it has to be performed only in the day, so it pertains to the category of the mitzvot that are timely, which means limited with time. And there is a rule: all the mitzvot, all the precepts that are limited by time, women are exempt. Why? Because the time that God found by women is more important. They have to have time. If, for example, if the Torah would have required from them to put tefillin every morning, who's going to take care of the children? Who's going to make sure that the house is okay? And God shows that the woman is the best for that. I mean, Dr. Lev, you try to take care of it. Let's see if you may. I tried. It didn't work. Well, it didn't work. So the women are... That doesn't mean, chas v'shalom, that God forbid that one should think that there is here a discrimination. No. Because our sages already said, on the contrary, the woman has to be very much interested in her husband going to shul. When he goes to shul, it's like she also goes to shul. Because men and the woman are one body. Whatever he does, she has a definite share, 50% with him. If he studies Torah, even though she is not under the obligation to study Torah, that means the Talmud, the Gemara, she's not under the obligation. If she wishes, she can. But she is not under the extreme obligation. Nevertheless, those women whose husbands, they go and they stay until midnight learning and then they come back late and the woman is by herself, if she does not complain and she comes and she says, how are you, my husband? And she prepares for him, ready for him and everything, she shares with him the great future of the reward for the Torah. So now, let's just shorten the whole thing. There is much more to say about this matter. God is in direct link with each one of us. And God is taking care of each one of us directly. And His attention is directed to us without interruption. Even at the time when we anger Him. Even when He is angry at us. And I don't think there is 1 minute that He is not angry at us. Not us only, but us, which means all the Jewish people all together and all the world. The Talmud in that same page, which I mentioned before in Masechet Berachot, so it says that God He gets angry every day at a certain time of the day. There are 3 hours, the earliest 3 hours of the morning, Tlat Sha'eka Maita. The first 3 hours of the morning, God has to get angry for 1 fraction of a second every day, non-stop, as it says in the verse, Ve'el zo'em bechol yom, and God gets angry every day. This is one of the deepest concepts that we have. God gets angry every day. Isn't He supposed to be angry when we anger Him? Depending if we anger Him. So how come He has a specific time for getting angry? There are several answers to this, but that's not the subject tonight. I'll give you only one that Rabbi Meir says. Rabbi Meir says, every morning the whole world wakes up. When they wake up, most of the world, they go to the sun, the moon, and all the idols that they worship, and they worship all the kings of the world. The Talmud says, Kol malche umot ha'olam. All the kings of the world. They get up, they remove their crowns from their heads, and they pray to whom? To all kinds of idols. That makes God angry. Since it happens every day, so God is angry only because of His magnanimous nature. So He set a time to that type of anger. This is an anger that lasts only for a fraction of a second, and there was only in the history of the world only one prophet who was able to pinpoint that fraction of a second, and that was Bil'am, the prophet. And yet, what happened when the day came, when in the story of Bil'am, when he wanted to curse the Jewish people, what does it say? When the king of Moab, Balak, said to him, well, I invited you to curse them, why don't you do so? He says, what can I do? I want to curse them, but God seems to be not in any anger these days. So how can, see, he had the great potential to know when was that second when God is angry. And the Talmud says, if, God forbid, if Bil'am was capable of cursing the Jewish people at that time, there would be no remnant. Not one of us will be left alive. So what did Hashem do? He says, he wants to curse my people. You know what I am going to do? Always, since the beginning of the world, of the creation, he gets angry every day at a specific time. At that time when there was that conflict between us and Bil'am, God says, I'm not going to get angry at all. And this way, Bil'am is going to that fraction of a second that he is waiting for it, but God is not angry. So how can I curse them? And that's one of the meanings of what it says in the Torah there. Ma'ekov lo kaboel. What can I curse? If they are not, they cannot be cursed. God is not angry. So you see that God's attention is directly upon us, and His biggest attention is only upon us, more than anything. I know it sounds presumptuous, and I know it sounds too much for anyone, for any other ear but ours to hear those kind of things. But you ask the question, that's the answer. Definitely God is with us every minute, only for us to bear His benefit, the shower of the tremendous benefit that He can give us would be so much, too much for us to bear. We are small. How much can we get? If we ask for rain, and if He gives it to us directly, the world will drown, because of His tremendous prosperity that comes directly from Him. So in order to give us rain, what does He do? He uses the 10 Sefirot, the 10 emanations. It's like a chain with 10 spots that one gives to the other one. It's distilled from one to the other, and it goes down. The more down it goes, the smaller it becomes, until it reaches the bottom. Now it fits our level to be able to absorb it. And that's the reason why we need malachim, we need angels to carry on things for our purpose, and vice versa. One of them is Sandalphon. He has to carry, it's only an expression, a philosophical expression that shows that even our prayers, when he carries them to him, it's only because they need to be distilled. In order for us to receive what he wants to give us, it has to be through intermediaries. But the attention itself is direct. That's the reason why I waited until everyone is here, because this is a very important question. And even though we call the tefillin an antenna, you could call it an antenna, but I never saw the word antenna in the Talmud. So therefore, the real reason behind tefillin is, number one, remember, it's a sign of royalty of the Jewish people. And second, that our attachment to Him, and showing to Him that we believe that whatever we do with our hands, as well as whatever we do with our heads, is all directly from Him. Tonight, my plan was, and still is, to talk about the month of Nissan, which will bring us to Pesach. But hopefully we will be able just to cover what I have for you tonight about the month of Nissan. We still have next week, and God willing, even after that, to cover the laws of Pesach in general. You know, this coming Thursday is Rosh Chodesh Nissan, the beginning of the month of Nissan. What is so special about Nissan? Which suggests, by the way, the word Nes, which means miracle. It's a month of miracles. Number one, you should know that for those who go to pray every day, beginning Thursday, you know that in the middle of the prayers we have what we call tachanun, the supplications. The vidui, when we beat our hearts, after the silent prayer, and then the rachum vechanun and vayavor, the 13 midot. If you pray, then you know what I'm saying. Those are not to be said during all the month of Nissan, 30 days. Nothing of the kind should be said during the prayer. That's why the prayers will be shorter beginning Thursday. You know, immediately we finish with the silent prayer. If it is Thursday, then we open the Torah immediately without the prayers that are long prayers. Take about 15 minutes sometimes or 20 minutes until we reach the Sefer Torah. All this is omitted during the month of Nisan because these are prayers of distress and supplications, and therefore are not to be tolerated during the month of Nisan, because the month of Nisan is a month of joy. All the days, we are going to prove to you that every day of the month of Nisan is a day of joy. And therefore, as you know, for example, Khatan, when you get married, for 7 days you cannot say Tachanun, you cannot do Vidui, you cannot do those things because those are 7 days of Simcha, 7 days of joy. So the month of Nisan is made of 30 days of joy, non-stop. We have to explain in which way, why. Our sages said that the month of Nisan, all the days of Nisan, in the past, in the present, and in the future, are days of joy. We have to understand why. Ready? Jewish history, as registered in the Torah and in the Talmud, it says, "Be'echad beNisan hukam hamishkan." On the first day of Nisan, the tabernacle. Remember when the Jewish people had to spend 40 days in the desert? After they received the Torah, they built what we call the Mishkan. It was after the sin of the golden calf, so God says, "You will build a house for me." And they built a tent in which there were with gold and copper and silver, with the wisdom of Betzalel. I mean, we read the last few weeks only the parashiot that deal only with the building of the Mishkan. So on the first day of Nisan, it was inaugurated. It was erected. That's the first day of Nisan. So what? That's one day. Very good. It is a day of the occasion. It definitely justifies celebration. But that's one day. The thing is like this. When they erected the Mishkan, they had to do also the inauguration of the Mizbeach, the altar, upon which they would bring sacrifices, with which they expressed their thanks to the Almighty, as well how they used to, by bringing the sacrifices, they used to eliminate all the sins that they committed, and so forth. This is, by the way, this coming Shabbat, that's when we start the reading of Vaikra, which is going to deal only with the sacrifices, which today we don't have since the destruction of the temple. But remember, the first day of Nisan was the day when the Mishkan, the tabernacle, which is the example of Bet HaMikdash, was erected on that day, before they entered the land of Israel. How many tribes the Jewish people had? 12. Each tribe had a prince, a Nasi. And each one of them, when the Mizbeach, when the altar in the tabernacle, in the Mishkan was ready, each one of them had to bring sacrifices. So each one, the tribe of Reuven, so Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Issachar, Zevulun, Binyamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, all these, they had the prince in charge of all the tribe. That prince, whether it is Shelumiel ben Tzuri Shaddai, who is the prince of Reuven, and so forth, they had to bring a sacrifice. Each one of the princes brought a sacrifices that day in order to glorify the Mishkan that was erected. With those sacrifices, there were also celebrations and parties given by the prince. That day, the day that was, let's say, for Reuven, for the tribe of Reuven, was the Yom Tov, was the holiday for that prince. And the rest of the Jewish people celebrated with him. So now you have 12 days of Nissan. The first 12 days of the month of Nissan were 12 days, I'm talking about long time ago, before the Jewish people entered the land of Israel, after they came out from Egypt. And they received the Torah, when they finally inaugurated the Mishkan, that was 12 days of celebrations. In commemoration of those 12 days, we also understand that these are days of happiness even for us. The atmosphere of those days remain up to today and up to the future, as long as it takes. Those were days of celebration. That's number one, the first 12 days of Nisan. No tachanun, no vidui, no supplications in the prayers. Why? Those are days of happiness, as it was in the past. Of course, you could ask me, so what? In the past it happened. So because it happened in the past, we should be also happy? Well, that's the problem with the Jewish people. Why do you think we celebrate Pesach? I mean, all we can understand is the people who came out from Egypt should celebrate Pesach, and that's it. Why? Were we also in Egypt? Which, by the way, the answer is yes. As we said, if it was not for the liberation of the Jewish people from Egypt, what do we say in the Haggadah Shel Pesach? Adayin anu uvanenu uvne banenu mishuabadim hayinu leFaro b'Mitzrayim. If we were not liberated then, even today we would still be slaves of Egypt. Of course, many commentaries explain, what do you mean? But today there was years ago there was what we call emancipation in the world, and there is no more slavery. So anyway, with God or without God, we would have been liberated, right? The answer is, for the Jewish people, liberation does not mean only from physicality. It means also from spirituality. Which means if there was no liberation from Egypt, we would be like all the Goyim. We would live like the Goyim live, and for us there is no greater slavery than that. But that's a different concept. We'll leave it for now. If you have any question, you could throw it to me. We'll try to deal with it. But in the meantime, we have proven that in the past the first 12 days of the month of Nisan were days of joy and celebration. And that's the reason why those days are also days of joy for us. Not of any specific celebration, but days of joy. What about the 13th day of Nisan? Is there any reason for any happy occasion on the 13th day? Can't you answer? Uriel, the 13th day. Well, before I give you the answer, I have to ask you another question. Let's say here is Pesach, 7 days, 8 days. What happens on the day that immediately arrive after Pesach, or after Shavuot, the day that follows?
Celebration.
It's not a celebration. Nobody celebrates really, but it is a day of joy. It's called Isru Chag. The day after the holidays was always given by God and sanctified by Him. So to speak, He tells us, give me another day. It's only an expression of God that He is happy with us. So He says, I know that the obligation of your holiday has ended, but I would like to fill you another day. That's the reason why even today, the day that follows any kind of holiday is considered to be Isru Chag, which means retain the holiday for me. Give me an extra time, God says. And that's the reason why it's almost considered like a holiday, even though we are allowed to go to work and everything. But in the prayer, we don't mention those supplications that normally we would say if they are normal days. So now we have 13 days in the month of Nisan that are days of celebration. Did you understand it, Chevre? Evant Marina. 12 days. And then, since those 12 days of Nissan were considered, each day of them was a holiday for the prince of the tribes, so automatically the 13th day was the Isru Hag, the day that comes after the holidays. And therefore it also is a day of celebration, and therefore does not tolerate the tachanun, those prayers of distress that we have every day. So what about the 14th day of Nisan? Well, that should be easy for you to answer. Huh? That's not Pesach yet. It's Erev Pesach. That's already something else. Erev Pesach, the eve of Pesach. I'll give you 2 reasons why this day is also considered the day of joy. Number 1, you should know, every holiday, the day before is considered like Erev Sukkot or Erev Shavuot. It's a day in which there are no supplications, because it is a preparation for the holiday. It has, the holiness of the holiday permeates its holiness upon it rubs on the day before and the day after. You understand? So the day before we start the holiday, it also has a certain kedusha, a certain holiness. Even Shabbat, by the way. Only Shabbat, since it's the end, the culmination of the 6 days of work. So Friday is not a day in which we don't say those prayers, but it still has a certain kedusha, but not from the morning, from the evening, from the afternoon. You already feel the coming of the Shabbat. The holiness of Shabbat is coming, and you feel it already from immediately after midday. If you agree with me or not, I can only tell you that that's how I feel, but that's what it says also in the books. Same thing also with the holidays. The day before the holidays is considered Erev Chag, and therefore it has also its status of joy and even some kind of celebration. And that's the reason why Erev Pesach is also a day of joy, which requires that nothing of this kind of prayer should be said. No supplications. In Hebrew it's called tachanun. The tachanun are those prayers that we start immediately after the silent prayer. We go by going Ashamnu, Bagadnu, we beat the heart. And then immediately we say Vayavor Adonai al panav vayikra. And then we sit down quietly and read a certain reading, Rachum v'chanun chatanu lefanecha rachem alenu. And then we get up, and for at least 10 minutes or 15 minutes we have the reading of El Melech Yoshev al Kisei Rachamim and Vayavor, and again and Anshe Emunah Avadu, and so forth. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but people who pray every day would know that very, very simply. So that we don't say any of these prayers during those days. So now we have proven that 14 days of the first 14 days of Nisan are days of joy, in which you have to behave with them like if it is a holiday or the like. What about the 15th? Well, from the 15th and 7 more days, we have no problems. It is a holiday. So now in Eretz Israel, of course, it is 7 days. In America and the rest of the world is 8 days. So we have another 8 days here, or 7 days in Israel, in which there is absolutely no discussion about this. So now altogether we have 14 plus 8. That how many we have altogether? 22 days. No discussion about there's no problem about Tachanun. We don't say Tachanun. Right? What about the 23rd day? Also another day of joy. Why? Tell me.
Extra day.
Because it's after the holiday. Again, it's called Isru Chag. So that day also. So now we have 23 sure days in which there is no Tachanun. Those are days of joy. What about the 7 last days? How come we still continue not saying Tachanun for the coming 7 days? Well, that will require a little bit of explanation. The coming 7 days, truly for us, do not mean much. There is only one rule, that when the majority of the days of the month pass in joy and celebration, then we continue with whatever few days are left. That's as far as we are concerned. because we have no specific occasion in them. So how come we don't say Tachanun, those prayers of supplications? Only because the majority of the days of the month have passed with happiness. Therefore, the last few days also will pass in happiness. That's where the case of the majority that overcomes the minority. That's all. But historically talking, since we told you in the beginning of the lecture that the days of Nissan, all the days of Nissan are days of happiness in the past and in the future, then the 7 days that are left now, the reason for considering them as days of happiness relates more to the future than today. What's going to be in the future? And the answer will be the reason why I chose this lecture tonight. What will happen in the future, in those days? Our sages said in the Talmud in Masechet Rosh Hashanah on page 11, Benisan nig'alu avotenu, ubenisan atidim lehigael. In the month of Nisan was the redemption of our fellow Jews, right? Of our ancestors from Egypt. It happened in Nisan. That's why we celebrate Pesach in Nisan. And the novelty about this is that in the month of Nisan will be the future redemption. Which means when the Mashiach comes, and the redemption which we will explain soon, in what things is it expressed, this redemption that's coming, but it will happen also in Nisan. Now, which means there is going to be a redemption. When? In the month of Nisan. When in the month of Nisan? There is a speculation between the sages according to Rabbi Yoshua, Lel Pesach. The night of Pesach, Mashiach will come. The only problem is that there is an opinion of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai in Masechet Rosh Hashanah on page 30, where he says that immediately with the coming of the Mashiach, we shall proceed with the building of Bet HaMikdash. There is a problem here. What's the problem?
Holiday.
It's a holiday. How can you build? Very good. I mean, if it is the night of Pesach, Pesach is a holiday. And if it is a holiday, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai tells me that immediately the building of Bet HaMikdash will begin, how can you begin the building of Bet HaMikdash on a holiday? Are we allowed to work in the holiday? Are we allowed to build in a holiday? Especially that there is another statement in the Talmud in Masechet Shvuot on page 15, where it says, En binyan Bet HaMikdash doche yom tov. Which means even though to build Bet HaMikdash is so important, but it does not remove the holiness of the Yom Tov, of the holiday. Which means you cannot build Bet HaMikdash on Yom Tov. So this is a contradiction to what I am saying. First we said that Rabbi Yochanan said the Talmud said, Rabbi Yoshua says that the Mashiach will come, the redemption will come on the night of Pesach. And immediately it will be followed by the building of Bet HaMikdash. And then we ask the question, how can we build Bet HaMikdash if it is a holiday? Especially that we know that there is a statement that says you cannot build on a holiday, even Bet HaMikdash, because even though Bet HaMikdash is holy, it does not supersede the holiness of the Yom Tov, of the holiday. You understand that? And therefore, how can we reconcile this apparent contradiction? Understand this?
I have a question.
Wait a minute. Let me first come out from this, and then I'll go to your question. The Talmud answers this very simply by saying we are talking about two different types of buildings. If we are talking about the Bet HaMikdash that people are going to build, that cannot supersede the holiday. Which means you have to wait until the holiday ends, then if you want you could build whatever you want. But since we are talking about the futuristic Bet HaMikdash, It's not anymore like the first and the second Beit HaMikdash. The first and the second Beit HaMikdash were built by people, by King Solomon and all the workers. But the third Beit HaMikdash will be from heaven. It will be spiritual. And since in heaven they don't keep the laws, they have no laws. The laws of the Torah were made for us, not for them. Therefore, Beit HaMikdash can be built even the night of Pesach. Don't ask me how. I don't know. All I know is what our sages say, that if there will be a redemption on the night of Pesach, then Beit HaMikdash will follow immediately. By whom? By heaven. What is your question, Marina?
The question was, during the Mashiach or after when Mashiach comes, are we as a Jewish nation continue to celebrate the same holidays?
That's another question. I will answer it quickly, even though it's a big subject. There's a certain statement in the Talmud that says, when the Mashiach comes, no more holidays, except Purim, but no more holidays. Let me just rectify the understanding of this passage by saying that's not how we understand it. What it means really is that the miracles that will happen in the future will be in such an excess that they will practically show that the miracles that happened in the past are smaller. Which means the aura of the holidays that we have today will dim somehow. It's not that we will stop observing the holidays. What I'm saying is not my explanation. It's based on the Jewish literature. And what it says is not, God forbid, there is not even one word from the Torah will ever be eliminated forever and ever. We will still celebrate Pesach and Shavuot and everything. Only they will not be as important as today. Why? Because the futuristic one will be so great and so big. Our sages are talking about a holiday of 3 weeks. You know when? From the 17th of Tammuz till Rosh Chodesh Elul. Those are, by the way, the saddest day of the Jewish history. That's where we have the fast of Tisha B'Av and so forth. But those days will become the days of great holidays. And since they will be so great, they will supersede the holidays of Pesach and Shavuot, that because of that our sages said that they will be eliminated. It's not that they will be eliminated, but the emphasis will not be on them anymore. The Zohar HaKadosh in Ra'ya Mehem 9, that commentary of the Kabbalah, in Parashat Pinchas on page 249, I'm quoting from the Zohar HaKadosh. Tamman umme le'abera me'alma zar'a de'esav amalek behahu zimna. The night of Pesach will be the night when the Mashiach comes, and it will be also the night when God has decided to eradicate forever the nation of Amalek and Esav, which means it's not to eradicate physically only. Of course, there will be also some physical damage, but it means that whatever influence Esav means most of the world, modern world, Amalek, the anti-Semite, all the anti-Semitism, Amalek is the natural enemy of the Jewish people. We discussed this in the past, somehow. All this, God will make sure that the night of Pesach will also be totally eradicated, whether it is physically or rather when the nations will accept the God as being the God of Israel and the Torah. And that's when the nations will come and ask us to help them to convert, and so forth. Let's not go into much into it, but that's what will happen the night of Pesach. And that's why Pesach is considered a futuristic also event, which will herald the coming of the Mashiach and the redemption, the future redemption in Eretz Israel. However, we find in the Talmud in Masechet Sanhedrin on page 20 a small contradiction. Another opinion. There is another opinion that says first God will take care of Amalek. When I say Amalek, I mean the enemies of Israel, those who hate us and who doesn't. And by the way, Amalek means also the evil inclination, Satan, has a lot of meanings, Amalek. And first God will take care of Amalek and will erase the descendancy of Amalek. And only after that, Bet HaMikdash will be built. And he learned, this opinion learns it from the Torah, in which it says, in the parasha of Amalek, Vehaya, Ve'iniach lachem mikol oivechem, there will be a day, God promises in the Torah, in which God will give us rest from all the enemies that surround us, that surround the Jewish people. And then immediately it is followed by the words, by the pasuk that says, Vehaya hamakom asher yivchar Hashem, the place which Hashem chose, which means Bet HaMikdash. From this, there is such an opinion that says first He's going to take care of the world and bring rest to the Jewish people from all the enemies that He had all throughout the centuries, and after that the Bet HaMikdash will be built. How great will be the miracles and the wonders then? There is one verse in the prophets where it says, Kime Eretz Mitzrayim ar'ennu niflaot, which apparently it seems to be saying that the miracles that will be in the future will be similar to the miracles that happened in Egypt, but our sages' tradition is to tell us that in fact they will be much greater. Alright, so now we are dealing with the last 7 days of Nissan. Why is it that the last 7 days of Nissan are considered days of happiness? I mean, we already finished with the 12 days, the first 12 days of the princes of the tribes. We finished with Isru Chag. We finished with the 7 days or 8 days of Pesach, and then again the Isru Chag, right? But we still have left 7 days. Why is it that they are considered to be days of happiness and celebration? Because even though we already mentioned that Bet HaMikdash might be built during Pesach, but remember, my friends, if you build Bet HaMikdash, what do you think we have to do? Huh? Besides the Korbanot, but we don't deserve something else also? I mean, we are going to build Bet HaMikdash, my God. Bet HaMikdash will be rebuilt, especially if it's going to be built by heaven. So what are we going to do? Celebrations. There is going to be days of celebration. So, okay, days of celebration, but it's going to happen the night of Pesach. So let Pesach be also a holiday of celebrations for that too. You understand my question? And we are still left with the problem. What about the last 7 days of Nisan? The answer is, there is a rule in the Talmud where it says, En me'arvim simcha besimcha. We do not mix one joy with another joy. Since Pesach we are busy with having the joy of the past, that the Jewish people came out from Egypt, and the holiday of Pesach with everything that it represents, right? We are busy with that, so we have to wait. Even though Bet HaMikdash might be built during Pesach, but still the celebration will not begin until after Pesach, because it's a different situation now. After Pesach there will be 7 days of celebration. For what? For the inauguration of Bet HaMikdash that already was built during Pesach before. Only we wait for Pesach to end so that we can begin the celebrations for the inauguration of the Mizbeach. So now we have seen, we have proven beyond any doubt that all the days of Nisan from the beginning till the end are days of Simcha Vesason LaYehudim, of joy and gladness to the Jewish people. And that's the reason why these days, all 30 days, are days in which we don't say supplications during the prayer and other things also. By the way, coming back to the first 12 days, which we are going to start from this coming Thursday, the minhag, the tradition, especially the Sephardim, I think, but even the Ashkenazim also, we have the minhag to read a text from the Torah that relates to the bringing of the sacrifices represented by each one of those 12 princes of the tribes of Israel. So every day, beginning Thursday morning, for 12 days, we are going to read at the end of when we finish Alenu Leshabeach and the end of the prayer of the morning, we immediately recite a certain text by Yom HaRevi'i Nasi Livne Elishama Ben Amiud, by Yom HaChamishi, by Yom HaShishi, by Yom HaShvi. Every day we read the text relating historically to the sacrifices that were brought by this by this prince of that tribe, and so forth. So remember to do this, Reuven. It's very important, by the way. They say it gives money. It gives your mazal a push. By the way, according to the halakha, we are not allowed during all the month of Nisan not to fast. Sometimes people could decide to have a fast. Let's say there is a problem in the world, there is war. We have permission, by the way, to decide for a congregation have this. You never heard such a thing? This congregation has decided to fast. We have many times. We even attend this fast it's called Ta'anit Tzibur, the congregational fast. This is forbidden during the month of Nisan. But what about an individual's fast?
Yes.
When a person wants to fast by himself, he wants to fast. Let's say you had a bad dream. Well, in that case, you could fast, even in the month of Nisan. Only except Rosh Chodesh, and except Shabbat, of course. And of course, not during the holiday. No, you still have a few days. No, I'm talking about the month of Nisan. In the month of Nisan, Ta'anit Yachid, the fast of the individual, is allowed. Like what, for example? You know that there is a certain tradition that the Khatan and Kala, when they get married, on the eve of their wedding, they fast. By the way, the Sephardim are not inclined to do that. Even though we did, in our milieu, in our circles, we did fast on the eve of because, I tell you why. You fast because our sages said that the night when you get married, all your sins are forgiven. It's like if you are completely born anew. So in order to implement that, we fast to symbolize the fact that now all sins are forgiven. It's like a kapara. So that's why. But Rabbi Ovadia Yosef writes in his book that it is not advisable to fast in that day because it makes you weaker and you need all your strength, the night of to dance and whatever it is. But the Ashkenazim do follow this tradition, and some of the Sephardim also. Except if the day when you are getting married falls on a day in which it could be a Hanukkah, for example. On the days of Hanukkah, we are not allowed to fast. So therefore, even for Khatan Vekala, you don't fast. That's one exception. What?
What about before every holiday, the oldest son has to fast? The first son?
Why don't you ask me what about a yortzeit? There is also a tradition that people do fast on the day of the yortzeit of their father or mother.
Yeah, they have to fast.
You see, when my father passed away, alav shalom,
it's a custom for Ashkenaz.
He passed away in Pesach. The night of Pesach, the second day of Pesach. And therefore the yortzeit is on Pesach.
So you're not allowed.
We cannot fast, we never fasted for my father. But for my mother, for example, we will have to fast that day.
Even one son, oldest son?
Every son, of course, anyone who can. Because this is not a law that is written in the halakha that you are under the strict obligation, but it is, as the Chachamim say, Puk chazeh ma'amach dabar. Sometimes we follow what people's heart says. And people have decided that on the day of the yortzeit they fast, as a kind of elevation to the soul of their parents. But it's not required, by the way. It's not required so much. People who are mindful about this and they cannot fast, they should give tzedakah on that day, the day of their yortzeit. That's all. But usually good people would fast on the day of the... So what happens now, the month of Nisan, if it is the days of the month of Nisan, I'm not talking about the days of Pesach or the holiday itself, that absolutely is forbidden. But what about the first days of Nisan that we said are days of joy? Are we allowed to have this kind of fast if it is a fast of a yortzeit? So in the book Chazon Ovadia, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef says yes, even though we don't have to fast, but if you want to fast, you can fast. And it is even suggestible, he says. Why? Because it is for the benefit of the parents. And since it is for the benefit of someone else, then you are allowed to do it. But as we said, fasting for the whole congregation or for the public is not permitted during the month of Nissan. Shall we stop here? I have a second part, but it's going to take us again to 11, but and it will relate to Birkata Illanot. You know what? I'll make it very short. With the beginning of the month of Nisan, what happens in the air? What happens in the world? Now it's springtime. Spring is starting. In the land of, by the way, in America, I don't know. I find it very hard to see it in the first days of Nisan that the trees are blossoming already. They are still as dry and decrepit, like from this winter that doesn't want to end.
In Israel.
But in Israel, the flourishing and the blossoming is beginning, and the law is like this. Now pay attention to this. I'll take just 5 minutes, to talk about Birkata Ilanot, regardless of whatever I prepare. It says in the Talmud, Hayotze bime Nisan, when you go out to the air, to the streets on the days of Nisan, and here you see trees that are blossoming. What is the blossoming of a tree? You know, the tree, before it starts giving you the fruits, it starts with flowering. The sprouting of a little bit of little flower. That's called in Hebrew melavlev, when it starts sprouting. At that time, which occurs, of course, in the days of Nisan, the early days of Nisan. In the land of Israel, no question about it. In America, maybe we'll have to wait a little longer. But as soon as you see the trees that starts, in which the blossoming starts to appear, we are under strict obligation to say the bracha that we call the blessing of the trees. That's a mitzvah once a year that we do. One can do it by himself, but it's better, the tradition is to do it with minyan. Are women under the obligation or not? Yes. That's what it says in the poskim. There is a big discussion on this. We do not, in other words, we tell the wife, do it if you can. But we don't exercise any force upon them on this. But it is advisable for the women also to attend the service of the blessing of the trees. What do we say? It's a long, we go outside in the street, all the minyan, usually it falls in America on Chol HaMoed, in the mid-holidays of Pesach. That's the day when we choose to get out in the morning, we finish the prayer, we get out to the street, and we say a certain prayer that takes us approximately 15 minutes with Kaddish and everything, but it consists primarily of that benediction that is Baruch Ata Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam Shelo Chiser Me'olamo Kelum. We bless the Almighty. We say to Him, thank you Hashem, that nothing is missing in this world. Shelo Chiser Me'olamo Kelum. Everything is in the world. You could find it, of course, if we don't find it, it's only because we don't know. Like it says in the Talmud, Imrek humikem, if you find it empty, it's only because we are empty. But everything, even the cure for death, you could find it in the world. It is there. Only you have to find it. So wherever you look, you see the God. In everything that in the trees, for example, the trees are dead now, right? For several months they have been dead. Well, in a week or two, you are going to see them coming back to life. How can we pass by these great miracles and not at least be excited? We should feel excited. We express our excitement by saying a bracha. Baruch Ata Hashem shelo chiser me'olamo klum, that nothing is missing in His world. Ubarabo beriot tovot, and He created good creatures and good creations in it. Ve'ilanot tovot, and good and beautiful trees. Lehanot bahem bnei adam. You'll find out that all the trees were created for what? I'll ask you, Marina, do we need apples for survival? Do we need apples for oranges? Do you need it? Otherwise you die? No. We can definitely live without apples and without oranges. So why is it that God gave us apples and oranges and such a variety of fruits that is endless? Why? For one reason. Lehanot bahem bnei Adam. God wants us to enjoy His word. He loves us, and that's His expression of love. You know, Rabbi Avigdor Miller used to say always, if you want to have a little excitement over the work of God and how much He loves you, go and visit a fruit store. Just go to a fruit store. Just go there with an open mind and watch the variety. And you should ask yourself, why do we need so much? It's only to make us enjoy this world. Like a bonbon and bonbon. That's all. And this is unbelievable. And this requires a blessing. That's why we say, Baruch Atah Hashem. Thank you, O Lord, who has given us everything in this world, whatever we want. And for the purpose. And He created the beautiful trees for what? So that we can enjoy ourselves. That's all. And since and the blessing is required because it is renewed, because again and again the trees die and then they come back to life again, which is like Tchiyat HaMetim. It's like the resurrection of the dead, and it is therefore a blessing is required. Yes.
Don't we say a blessing on Tu B'Shvat also?
Tu B'Shvat, there is no specific blessing. The blessing is only when the trees start to blossom. In Tu B'Shvat, it's the new year. The new year for the trees. That everything is already done. The fruits are there. Which, by the way, will remind me to tell you that not any tree is kosher for this mitzvah, by the way. You know, when you go out in the days of Nissan, and you see the trees and blossoming, as I said, you're required to say the blessing that we said. To say it twice. I mean once, with the kahal. But any tree, you have several categories of trees. You have trees that bear fruits, right? And you have trees that do not bear anything, like a maple tree, for example. A maple tree doesn't give you anything except beauty. Are we supposed to say this bracha, this blessing over a maple tree? Or any tree that is not fruit yielding? That's the very good. The halakha is, the law is that we are allowed to say this blessing only on trees that produce fruits. There is a discussion among the halachists. What about those trees that give us some good flowers that gives beautiful smell? Vradim. So most of the opinions is that we can say the blessing also over those trees that give us. There are some special trees in my old house where I was born. We had two beautiful trees that gave us the white, how did they call it? I forgot the name. So, white flowers that gave you such beautiful smell. And we use them they use azhar, the water of azhar. Azhar is Arabic for this type of flowers that they used to throw them in the tea. And you would drink tea from this and it would be such a tea. Oh boy, that's something. So anyway, the fragrance was all over. During the month of Nissan, all the house was filled up with the smell, with the odor of these flowers that made such a wonderful feeling all over. In those places where they grew, the whole street was beautifully. The smell was all over. Beautiful smell, beautiful odor. If that's the kind of trees, then we could say the bracha on it. How many trees are we supposed to make a bracha on? Minimum of 2 trees. It's better to find 2 trees that give you 2 different fruits. For example, in my street where I live, we have several trees. One of apples, one of grapes, and one of peaches, yeah, or pears rather. Yeah. So we are set. We could say the bracha on 2 different trees, 2 different.
One tree or
in the same tree? No, in the same street.
One tree or supposed to be one backyard.
It has no. Even if you are standing before 2 backyards, for example. In one backyard he has a tree of this kind, and the other one he has the tree of. As long as you see them, then that's a good place where to say were to read this blessing. Just in case you couldn't find, let's say you live in a place in which the only trees that the fruits that they give is only one kind of fruit, so the halakha allows you to do that also.
Grape tree.
Like grape trees, you could say bracha on the grape. Of course, why not? Any fruits that any trees that yield fruits, or even just flowers that give you good smell, you are allowed to say a bracha. The only thing is that it is better to do it on two different trees that give you two different fruits. But if you cannot, you could also say the bracha on two trees, minimum of two trees, even if they give you the same fruit. I think that's what about lemon trees? Because lemon, we don't eat lemons, we use the lemon. Are we allowed to say a bracha on lemon trees? Yes, because you do benefit from the lemon. Why not? What about? So we discussed already the flowers, and of course, if you see maple trees, don't give you anything except beauty. That is something else. We don't say a bracha on that. And if you say the bracha, that's considered bracha levatala, bracha in vain. What about grafted trees? You know, trees that are that you graft. You know, like for example, you have peaches that are not natural. You graft them with a different kind, and you mix the kinds. Are we allowed to say a bracha on grafted trees? We are not allowed to say a bracha on grafted trees. Why? Because originally they were not created by God. God did not. That was not the will of God. They are mutants or adapted or who knows what. But they were grafted by men. Man-made, therefore they are not. We don't say a bracha on that. Some have a different opinion on this, but the conclusion of this discussion is that it's better not to say a bracha on this type of trees that were grafted, because there is a rule, safek berachot lehakel. Whenever you have a doubt on a situation of mat that involves blessings, is to go to take the lenient view, and that is not to say the bracha. Are we allowed to say this bracha on Shabbat? People are even afraid. I never saw people doing it on Shabbat, but the halakha allows. They are allowed to do it on Shabbat, but somehow the tradition of people have decided not to do it on Shabbat. There was some opinion not to do it on Shabbat because they are afraid when you are in the midst of trees, children, or they might cut a tree, and that is forbidden on Shabbat. So therefore, but the truth is that you are allowed to do it on Shabbat. Only be careful not to commit something that might be against the nature of Shabbat. What about if all the month of Nissan has passed and you couldn't find a tree that has blossomed? What do we do? Are we allowed, maybe in the month of Iyar, the month after, are we allowed? Well, if it happens, I think it happens sometimes, especially here, that all the month of Nissan you don't see any trees that give you any. Most of them they do, but sometimes you might not see that. If you don't see that, then à la rigueur, definitely you could do it also in the early days of the next month, of the month after the month of Nissan. But basically in the month of Nissan, just make sure, that's a very important point. Let's say a tree laden with fruits. Are we allowed to say bracha on that? Apparently yes, huh? No! We say this blessing only upon the trees that starts blossoming, which means they did not give us a fruit yet. If you see that the fruit, even when the fruit is not edible, if it appears, you are not allowed to say the bracha. It's done already. So you say the bracha only when it is starting the flourishing, the blossoming. And with this we stop this lecture. God bless you and thank you for everything.